The king who couldn't speak, practice makes powerful. Have you ever felt your voice tremble when you tried to speak in front of others? Have you ever stayed silent because you feared making mistakes? Imagine if your entire kingdom depended on the words you speak, yet you could not bring yourself to say them. This is the story of a king. A king admired for his wisdom, his kindness, and his courage. But he carried one secret that nobody expected. He could not speak. Or at least, not in the way a king was expected to. Every time he stood before his people, words abandoned him. His throat tightened, his tongue stumbled, and silence filled the air. And for a king, silence was not power, it was weakness. The court whispered, the enemies laughed, and even his advisors began to doubt him. How can a king lead without words, they asked. How can he inspire, command, or defend his people if he cannot even speak? And so, the king lived with shame. Every meeting, every ceremony, every gathering, he feared the moment he would be asked to speak. But this is not a story of defeat. This is a story of transformation. Of how a king who could not speak, discovered that practice makes powerful. The king was not born without a voice. As a child, he laughed, played, and spoke like any other boy. But when his father, the old king, died suddenly, the crown was placed upon his head far too early. And with the crown came expectation. The weight of the kingdom pressed against his chest, and his voice collapsed under its pressure. Every word he tried to deliver in public came out broken, shaky, or unfinished. At first, the people had patience. They believed their young king would grow into his voice, but years passed, and nothing changed. The ministers spoke for him. The generals commanded without his orders. And little by little, his kingdom began to slip away. He felt trapped inside his own silence. He was a king in title, but not in power. And worse than the whispers of his people, was the whisper inside his own mind, "You are not enough, you will never be enough." One evening, after another council meeting where he had failed to speak, the king wandered into the royal gardens. There, he found an old gardener planting seeds in the soil. "Why do you bother planting?" the king asked softly. "You will not live to see these trees grow tall." The gardener looked up, smiled, and replied, "Because someone planted trees for me, and now I plant for others. Practice is not for me, it is for those who will come after me." Those words struck the king. Practice is not for me, it is for others. That night, he made a decision. If he could not yet speak for himself, he would practice speaking for his people. Not once. Not twice. But every single day. And so began the king's hidden journey. The king began alone. Each morning, before the sun rose, he would stand in the great hall. There were no people, no advisors, no generals, only empty chairs and cold stone walls. But he imagined. He imagined his people before him. He imagined their eyes watching, their ears listening, their hearts waiting. And then, he spoke. At first, his words trembled. His voice cracked like dry wood. He stumbled over sentences and paused for long, painful silences. But he did not stop. The next day, he returned. And the next. And the next. He practiced not just words, but pauses. He practiced not just speaking, but breathing. He practiced not just his voice, but his belief in that voice. Still, doubt remained. Will this ever work, he thought. Am I only fooling myself? One night, he asked the gardener again, "What if I practice forever and still fail?" The gardener, planting quietly, answered, "Even the tallest tree begins as a fragile seed. Practice does not guarantee perfection, but it guarantees growth." The king realized something powerful. Practice was not about being perfect. It was about becoming stronger. Months turned into years. The king had practiced in silence for so long, his voice had grown stronger without the world noticing. But fate always finds a way to test us. One day, news arrived. A neighboring empire threatened to invade. Fear spread like wildfire. The generals argued, the ministers panicked, and the people trembled. At last, the council turned to their king. "Speak to your people," they begged. "If they do not hear strength from you, they will surrender to fear." The king felt the old weight press against his chest. The old silence knocked at his door. But this time, he was ready. He stood on the balcony overlooking the crowded square. Tens of thousands of faces looked up at him. They waited. They doubted. They whispered, "He cannot do it." The king closed his eyes. He remembered the empty hall, the hours of practice, the gardener's words. And then, he spoke. At first, his voice shook. But he kept going. He slowed his breath. He paused with intention. And soon, his words filled the air like thunder. "My people," he said, "we are not weak because we are afraid. We are weak only if we choose silence. But today, I choose to speak. And together, we will stand." The crowd erupted. For the first time, they heard not just a king, but a leader. From that day on, the king's voice became his greatest weapon. Not because it was perfect, but because it was practiced. He knew the secret now: practice makes powerful. And soon, his people learned it too. Young soldiers practiced until they became fearless. Children practiced reading until they became wise. Merchants practiced their craft until they became prosperous. The kingdom flourished, not through perfection, but through practice. And the king who once could not speak, became remembered as the voice of his people. So remember this story. No matter what weakness you carry, no matter what fear silences you, practice makes powerful. Do not wait for perfection. Begin today. Speak, stumble, fall, rise, and keep practicing, because one day, your voice, your effort, your persistence, will echo louder than you ever imagined. This is the story of the king who couldn't speak. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful lessons. Here we learn, aspire, master, reflect, and evolve together. Until next time, keep practicing, and keep growing. Thank you.